Man, I love going for a cruise in a convertible on a nice sunny day.
It is gorgeous, but it's two guys' garage. It's not two guys running around having a good time in a convertible. So we're always looking for an excuse to get you out of the house and get you into the garage.
Yeah, we got a lot going on today. We found some problems. Follow us in. It's going to be a good one.
Do you have a car?
Maybe with a little excessive body roll.
Maybe it's kind of chattering a little bit.
Yeah, it's got some harshness in it. Maybe you got a lot of miles. Ours has 60 to 70,000, so we're beyond that 50,000 mile mark to start looking at things like shocks and struts.
Doesn't have that new car feel. Shockingly, you should be changing out your shocks at 50,000 miles.
Why?
Well, because after 1,500 times a mile of doing this, you get a little tired.
You get a little tired. Well, think about 50,000 miles of that. That's 75 million jumping up and down, harsh impact. So I bet 75 million of anything you try to do, you'd get a little tired of.
I'm tired after just 20.
So it's time to do a little bit of that replacement.
Now, in the old days, you know, you just feel it and go, oh yeah, need some new shocks.
So bouncing up and down, I think.
There's a lot more to it now. It's a lot more detailed, and we're going to show you. So let's go ahead and get this thing up and get started. Okay. Before we pop this wheel off and get inside, change the shocks, I want to go ahead and check out our ball joints.
All right, let me get this jack under here.
Okay, we're going to support the bottom A-arm as far outside as possible.
There we go.
And I'm going to put a pry bar underneath and start kind of pushing up and down and see how that feels. And it feels pretty good. And you know, you can put dial indicators on here and check it. There are a lot of specs for that. But a good start is just to see if it feels solid. If it feels solid in this type of test, then more than likely it's okay.
It looks that ball joint looked pretty tight.
Yeah. Another test, kind of in and out, and see how that feels. And that seems to feel pretty good too. You can also do that with a pry bar as well. That seems to feel pretty nice. So the other thing we want to do is look at the tie rod end. It's just inside, coming off the rack. That's what steers you left to right. Go back and forth, feel that.
Oh, I can see it.
Yeah, that's pretty loose.
Yeah, I can see it moving.
Okay, let's just change that out. I mean, that's easy to replace. Right. So we'll go ahead and do that. And so let's get the wheel off, get that started. Cool tool. First thing you want to do is just go ahead and look at the seals in your ball joints, make sure they're not leaking or torn. They seem to look fine. Come upstairs, ooh, look at this whizzy tool I'm going to show you in removing the shock. Now, the first thing is there's a weird little stud on the top. Now if you see this little slot, it's going to go onto the top of this stud. It's going to keep it from moving. Put your ratchet on, put your socket on there. Now there's an extension. Make sure you get it the right direction. There you go. Put your extender down in. It's locked. And voila. Now you can do this with a small wrench. Put a ratcheting wrench on the side. No big deal, but you know, when you have a cool tool, you like to show it off. Cool tool.
What do you say, Brian? You about got that guy out?
Voila.
Nice. Out with the old and in with the new. Now, shock technology has come a long way. You know, in the old days, we came up with the spring, which was great. But you found yourself just bouncing down the road because there's not enough internal friction in a spring typically to slow down that oscillation, so it just keeps going. So we got to come up with a way to get friction to get something to dampen out.
Now the original one was a friction shock, so they took leather, put it in between a couple of pieces of steel, put a bolt in between, and that's how you controlled that friction. Keep that spring from
slow down that motion till it eventually stops.
But funny side story, the dude that actually invented the shock absorber, 1906, Brush, and the dude wrecked his brother's car. And seriously, he wrecked his brother's car and figured out because he went into a rut and the thing like right off the road, rolled it into a cow pasture through barbed wire. Yeah. Seriously.
Well, that's why we've developed stability control and, you know, eventually tire control. So that original, you know, leather spring, it wore out over time. It wasn't consistent. It had stiction on it. So it wasn't uniform and even. We came up with the hydraulics.
Yeah, and that was in the 30s. And this was a big window of change. Those were normally lever operated. But eventually we switched to the tube type. And if, for those of you that aren't familiar, the basic idea is that you're taking fluid, pushing back and forth through a valve. The changing of that valve is what gives a modern shock its characteristics.
Yeah, and all the different ways to dial in different performances. So we've got two different styles of shock. We've got a twin tube and a monotube. Now most vehicles come with a twin tube. They're a little bit more, say, cost friendly, and they do an excellent job. Now what happens is you've got fluid on both sides. This is sort of a piston with a lot of different valves in it, and we'll show you some of those. Now fluid's sitting on this side, and as the piston goes in and out, fluid's trying to go through that piston and through those valves. Well, on the twin tube, the fluid actually comes in through and in between the tubes, and up here somewhere you've got nitrogen gas. So you've got oil and nitrogen gas kind of exposed, and they stay, separated until you start to get a lot of impacts and a lot of motion, like say racing, desert racing. The truck guys, they usually switch to a monotube for a couple of good reasons. So really great up to a good performance level. Then we're going to step up to a monotube.
I'm going to go put this in.
All right. Now the Corvette here came with the monotube, so that's what we're going to replace with the KYB shocks. Now a monotube has the fluid here and here again on both sides of this piston. And you can see this guy goes up and down. Now the fluid's got to go somewhere. So again, it's going through the piston through small holes and then some valves. Well, what we've got here is a floating piston. So we've got oil and we've got our nitrogen down here. This piston will move up and down as needed, but it keeps the oil and the nitrogen separated, so you're not going to build up frothing over time, which is going to deteriorate performance of your shock. Now let me show you some of those valves. These are kind of neat. They're pretty complicated. Let's see if I can pull this apart carefully. We've got our piston assembly and our valves essentially inside of here. And if I dump them out, there we go. We can see all the different holes in there. Now the size of those holes and the viscosity of the fluid is going to determine how much force it takes to move the shock at different speeds. Well, I can do a couple of things. I can start taking, some of these shims or discs, and I can start placing them over the holes. Well, that's going to be like a one-way valve for certain motion, but the thickness of that plate, those little guys are going to spring open and spring closed. I can start adding shims to make it more stiff. The different layers can even control things like low impact, medium impact, or high loads. So I can do a lot of different tuning with what's going on in there, as well as the viscosity of the fluid, the pressure of the nitrogen gas. I can start making the shock behave in a lot of different manners to cover a lot of different ground. Now your control systems, your stability control, your braking control, well, they're all developed around a certain shock with all these characteristics. So over time, you can imagine those little shims, they wear out over time. They can't, control the valve and the motion, the fluid motion the way it used to be, so you need to replace them. Now your stability control, your braking control, they know what to work with because that's what they were designed to. And even if you don't have it, as a driver, especially if you get in a panic situation, you need these things to behave the way they should so that you're safe and your fun factor doesn't get degraded over time. All right, when we come back, we're going to address that tie rod, start making this Corvette ride on rails again. Hey, welcome back. Now we got our Federated Corvette Sweet Ride here, and we're doing a lot of work on, getting the suspension, the dynamics back in tune. We just got our KYB gas adjust shocks put in. Brian got everything torqued on the top and the bottom. We got 21 and 19 foot-pounds, and we got a wobbly tie rod. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this guy out and get a new one in. And a good trick is measure the length of this arm, the center of the ball in this tie rod before you take it off. So you might want to pick, the first thread, maybe up here to the boot. Get yourself a nice location, write the number down, and then when you thread on your new tie rod, you're going to get it about the right length as your original. It'll get you close enough to get down the road to get that alignment done. So let me see if I can get this tie rod out. In the meantime, Brian's got some tips for your cars at home. According to industry sources, over 23,000 collisions are a result of tire blowouts. Not a good thing. Tires are expensive, a lot of these nicer tires, and what happens is you lose pressure and you start to get a lot of deformation. You see what the shape of a tire looks like. All that, back and forth motion builds up heat, you get a blowout. Well, a great way to prevent that is a tire pressure monitoring system. A lot of your newer vehicles, 2007 and 8s and up, all have it on board. You've already got it. Now they have sensors in them. Now these little guys right here, they go right into the wheel, but occasionally they go bad. This is a great little replacement kit from Standard Motor Products. It's a good way to keep your system up and going. Now you want to consult your technician. The sensors are, fragile, so they're going to use some special tools, and they go right inside your wheel. Obviously, you've got to break your tire down. You got to rebalance it. But once you've got that in there, you fill all your tires up to the right static cold pressure, and you're going to recalibrate to 0. And when your tire pressure starts to get a little bit low, 25% below standard, that's when it's going to flash that you need to take care of it. So if you want to upgrade, you can do an old car too. You can have a system installed really simple and easy with a little monitor. Keep your old car running just as safe as your new car.
This tip is brought to you by Standard Motor Products and the fine folks at Federated.
Hey, welcome back. Now we got our old tie rod off, piece of cake, ready to throw our new one on from Moog.
Yes, this is one high quality unit. Comes with a couple of nice features. You see it's got the wrench, so when you spin it on, also when you lock your jam nut, you've got a perfect spot there. It also comes with a grease fitting, so you'll be able to service it over time.
Imagine that.
I know, it's a crazy idea.
I know, a simple thing the OEs just seem to leave off nowadays.
You know, 1 cent times a few million starts to add up.
I guess so, but problem solved.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, speaking of problems, here's the inside of a ball joint, which is the same basic construction. Now, this is off one of our other projects. Actually, a guy who works here.
Rob.
Oh, I didn't say it. Now, imagine driving around with something this sloppy. That must have been one wild ride. Now, you know, some of the reasons why you get this kind of wear, a lot of the OEs will use a polymer plastic as the bearing surface on that ball joint. So you can imagine it's not going to wear, you know, the same way you'd like, have the same lifespan, or be heavy duty.
Those were the days when you could buy, you know, a serviceable item. Well, you still can from Moog, and this is nice. So let's pull this one apart. This is your gusher bearing, and this thing is porous, believe it or not, and it's going to hold it nice and tight. There's a spring. See that little flat spring right there? That's kind of pushing on it to keep it nice and tight up in the top as well. And like we said, nice grease fitting, so that's going to be a good quality unit you can service.
Yeah, well, that gusher bearing is really cool. It's got sort of micro pores in it to let that lubrication actually feed up and hold that lubrication around that bearing surface. Now, this is that same gusher bearing material. I've got a little air pump here, and you can see if I cap the end with the right end and squeeze, check that out. Look at all those little bubbles coming out of there.
That's
so
freaky.
those are those micro pores to help that lubrication get where it needs to be.
You wouldn't think that metal would be porous like that, would you?
I know, it's amazing construction.
It's awesome. All right, we have to take a break right now. Hold on. Welcome back. We're here on our Federated Corvette and working on the rear axle here. Transmission's in the back in this car, which is kind of surprising. 60,000 miles, so we need to work on our transmission fluid and changing it. First thing we did is Automotive Service Equipment gave us this really cool T-Tech automatic transmission fluid exchanger. And like it sounds, takes the old fluid out and puts the new fluid in. There are a couple of fittings in the front where the transmission cooler is, so we plugged into that. We turn on the car and we're getting rid of the old fluid and we're putting in the new. Now the problem is, we come here and we still got some of that transmission fluid left where the filter is, and we need to change the filter. That's the big deal. When you do a flush, make sure that the guy is not only flushing your fluid, but that he's changing your filter. When I pull this off and we put it on the bench, we'll show you why. All right. Kind of nice knowing that all this fluid looks nice and new because we flushed it all the way through the system.
In the old days, we used to just drop the pan. Well, in the meantime, a lot of times you get that transmission bath. Well, that was great because you changed the filter and you got some of the fluid. But half the fluid's still in the converter and still in the rest of the transmission. So you're just recycling that old dirty fluid through. So it was a good start. Somewhere in the 90s, we came up with the flush machines. And those were great because you could flush out the entire system of fluid. But we kind of got a little bit lazy and quit dropping the pan to change that filter. So again, we kind of cut ourselves a little bit short.
Yeah, make sure if you do the flush, if you're at a place, get the filter. That's the big deal, and we'll show you why right here.
Yeah, now you're going to build up, you know, clutch materials and small amounts of debris, which is normal under, you know, basic wear. But check out the magnet. You want to come in here and clean that magnet. I mean, you can see what kind of stuff builds up in the fluid. Now you're trying to trap that in your magnet and your filter. So cleaning those really lets the system run clean, you know. Now this looks pretty good. You're just going to look for, you know, debris material like metallic, you know, kind of shards, things where you know you've got metal to metal contact. Well, that gives you a heads up so you can get a transmission repaired before you get stuck on the side of the road.
This is normal wear. It's just from your clutch plates, so not a big deal. It's fine stuff. But you can imagine that if your engine is clean or your transmission is clean, it's going to run a lot better. So if you look at the old filter compared to our new one, I mean, it's not horrible. You know what I mean?
It's actually really good, and this is what you want. You want to inspect it. That's going to give you that heads up. You want to clean it. That's going to make it last a long time. And then you can kind of forget it till the next time you got to service it.
Sure. And look how much different it is between the two.
Yeah.
So the kit we use, we got from ATP. This is a really nice kit, and it comes with your filter, comes with your gasket, the multi-seal. And if you look on the bottom, one of the nice features they have is they actually tell you which fluid to use.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to be able to narrow it down. Now they've got 5 fluids that break down all those 60 kind of varieties into 5 main categories, so you got you covered, and it's real simple. And they identify it so you can't mix it up.
They also have a flush that you can run to help get rid of a lot of the old oils and stuff. This was already put into our machine, so we flushed it through.
Yeah, so it's an easy job you can do or have it done, make your transmission last for a whole lot longer.
Now the thing to button this up, which is weird compared to a normal car, since it does have a rear transaxle, there's no dipstick tube, which makes it a lot harder
it'd
to
be
fill.
a really long one from the front.
Right. So we're going to go ahead and put the gasket on, clean the pan, button it back up, fill it with fluid, get it running, and then we actually have to check the level on the drain plug in order to see that we get the right height.
Yeah, so we'll do kind of like you do on a differential. We'll fill it up till it dribbles off while the transmission's running, cap it, we're done.
Cool. Well, I hope you learned a lot of stuff today with shocks and maintenance. A special thanks to Federated for hooking us up with parts. Thought that was a pretty cool show.
Yeah, a great way to keep your vehicle running on its rails like it should and lasting a long time.
Catch you next time.
See you guys.